our Instant Pot today, or any pressure cooker that you prefer to use, and we're going to make pressure cooker roast. This was the first recipe that I ever cooked in my Instant Pot, and it is a constant here at our house. First, we'll turn on the saute function and put in some oil. This is about 2 tablespoons of vegetable oil. I've already prepared the roast by trimming off some of the visible fat, just so it'll be a little bit leaner. This is a top round roast. The recipe calls for a chuck. I say use whatever cut of beef that you would like to. I usually, again, prefer a leaner cut. This one got most of the fat off. We're gonna go ahead and season it, so when our oil gets hot, we can put it in and sear it. I have some pepper, onion powder, and a little bit of seasoned salt. I'm not going to put a lot of salt on it just because we will be using some beef base or broth or bouillon cubes, whatever your preference is there, to cook it in. So we don't really want to add a lot more salt because it's already going to be pretty salty with that in there. If you're using a low sodium beef base and you feel like it needs a little more flavor, then you could add a little more salt. I'm using a beef base, a standard beef base, so it's going to be pretty salty. Okay, our oil is hot, so I'm just going to lay the piece of roast in. I'm going to let this sear in here for probably between 5 and 10 minutes, just to really get a good hard sear on it. That's going to develop a lot of flavor with the meat proteins. Our roast has been in 5 minutes per side to sear, so I'm going to go ahead and turn off the saute function. Pour in some water because I'm going to do water and beef base rather than broth, and that's going to help deglaze it. And then we'll add in some Worcestershire sauce. I apologize, I butcher that word every time. Just didn't work for me. So here we go. A bit of a scrape with your tongs. Go ahead and put in the Worcestershire sauce and our beef base, which per the container, it says about 1 teaspoon of beef base to a cup of water, or 8 fluid ounces of water. So it's going to be approximately 2 teaspoons of beef base. And I usually just drop it in and kind of give it a stir to help it dissolve. Now, the recipe says to go ahead and put an onion in here. I don't really like to add the onion. I find that it makes the roast too sweet for my preference. If you wanted to, this would be the time that you would add the onion in before we go ahead and put the roast on for 30 minutes of pressure cooking. Okay, our roast is in, so we'll start preparing our vegetables. Little trick here, if you have old sale flyers, newspapers that are paper and not the plasticky stuff, you can peel your carrots, potatoes, you can put your vegetable peelings on them, and then they can go straight into the composter. So it's a really easy way to clean up and do a little bit for the environment. So that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to peel my carrots, and I'm actually going to leave my potatoes with the skins on. Skins are great sources of fiber. All of our carrots have been peeled and washed. Our potatoes are washed. Since we're not going to peel them, we'll just go ahead and start preparing them to be put into our roast. First of all, I'm going to cut off the ends of these carrots, put them in our compost pile. The recipe says just to cut them into bite-sized pieces. So our carrots are done. Now we'll move on to our potatoes. These are smaller potatoes. The recipe called for 4 large potatoes. I have a bunch of smaller potatoes that came in the sack, so I'm just going to quarter them. Okay, we're done with our veggies, and we still have less than 10 minutes before our pot roast is ready to release the pressure and add in our vegetables. Timer just went off on our Instant Pot, so we will go ahead and cancel. Move this away from everything like usual and do the quick release method. And flip this around. Remove the lid. Smelling great. Add in our vegetables, and be careful when you add in the vegetables because there is a lot of the broth in here, so it will splash if you're not careful, at least with the first ones, and then you can kind of dump them in. Change it back to sealing, pressure cook, 15 more minutes. Timer went off. We're ready to release the pressure from our roast and veggies. So it's pretty handy to use a spider to get most of the vegetables out. Some of them are going to break. That's just part of it. We'll try to keep most of them intact, and this does a great job with that. Also keeps most of our broth inside our pot, which is important because we're going to make gravy in the Instant Pot as well. That looks like we've gotten all of the big pieces. If at this point, if you wanted to, you could take the broth, put it through a separator, a fat separator, and get as much of the fat off as possible. Really, I cut off a good portion of the fat from the roast, and the fat that's in there is our 2 tablespoons of vegetable oil that we used at the beginning to sear the roast. So I'm not too particularly concerned. There's not a lot of fat. But what we're going to do next is we're going to turn our saute function back on, and we'll start making gravy. Okay, so our saute function is back on. There's a couple of different options you can do to make gravy. You could actually take some of the broth out, put it in a small bowl, mix it up with your flour amount, which this is going to be about 4 tablespoons or 1/4 of a cup of flour. I'm going to use just a small little strainer just to tap it in and whisk at the same time, just to help keep from getting any lumps, or we're going to get as few as possible. Done adding all the flour in, the gravy is thick, so this meal is ready to be eaten. Enjoy!